Hello, and welcome. Welcome once again to the Secrets of the High Demand Coach podcast. And here with us today is, I think, the high demand coach of high demand coaches. I'm a little partial because she's also a scale architect, but she is the one and only Jenni Catron, who's a leadership coach, author, and speaker. Her passion is to cultivate healthy leaders to lead thriving organizations. She speaks at conferences and events nationwide, seeking to help leaders develop the right clarity and confidence to lead well. As founder and CEO of the Foresight Group, she consults organizations on leadership, team culture, and organizational health. And with over 20 years of experience in corporate and nonprofit organizations, Jenni is passionate about helping leaders put their feet to their vision. Jenni's also the author of her brand new fantastic book called Culture Matters, a framework for helping your team grow and be unstoppable. She's here with us today. Jenni, thanks for taking the time out of your ridiculously busy schedule. I think out of anybody I know, you're the busiest of busy, and it's all really effective. I don't know how you do it.
I was gonna say, I don't know if busy's always the best litmus test, but yes, it's been a full season for sure.
It's an unbelievably productive. Well, let me say it this way: the amount of things that you get done make me think that you're really, really busy. So we'll put it that way. But I want to dive in. There's a couple of amazing insights in your book that I want to explore here today. Before we let folks know how they can get a copy themselves. But the first thing out of the gate that jumped out, you lay out this 5-part framework, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But the first step in that process was assessing your
Yeah.
culture. And so the question that I have for you is, who defines what your culture actually is? Is it what the founder thinks it is, what they think it should be? Is it the 5 things that are true of everyone on your leadership team? Is it what people say in exit interviews? Who actually gets to define what the real culture of your organization is?
Gosh, Scott, that's such a great starting point because I think, culture kind of became an accidental passion point for me in that I think as leaders, we all aspire to a great culture and we all assume our culture is great or it's at least better than we think it's better than it actually is. Because as a leader, we hold control over it, right? Like the experience we have influence over. But the reality of our culture is often quite different. And,
Mm.
we've all been there. We've been in organizations where, you know, we knew senior leadership didn't quite know what the experience felt like throughout the
Right.
organization. And then we've grown into the positions of leadership where you're like, somebody shares something with you and you're like, what? I had no idea that was how you were feeling, or that's what's going on, or whatever the case might be. And so one of my kind of accidental uh, discoveries as I moved up into leadership was that getting the truth of your culture is so incredibly hard the more senior you are in the organization. And to
Yeah.
answer your question, culture is being shaped by everybody who's a part of the team. Like everybody on the team is shaping the experience of the organization. So everybody's influencing culture. Senior leaders have a little more influence on it, just because we hold a lot more decision-making power and so forth. But everybody on the team is shaping the culture, and therefore they have the best understanding and clarity of what it actually is. And so when we talk about assessing our culture, it requires a humility from us as leaders to say, I really need to hear from everyone what they're experiencing, what's true about our culture. And that's why that's the first phase of our process, the assessment phase of our framework, is saying, hey, we've got to assess just what's true.
Yeah.
What's our current reality? And the only way to do that is to make sure that everybody who's a part of the team is actually speaking into that and giving us perspective and understanding of what the culture feels like throughout the organization.
Yeah, it's so true. Folks who've heard me share some of my story will know my "you are here" moment was a really big one, but I'm a firm believer in the fact that we have over-indexed on our destination, right? We everyone talks about where we're going, but very few people take the time to figure out where you are, right? And so it gets crazy when you start to lay out the metaphor, right? So it's like if I want to get to Kansas City, right? And I'm in Atlanta, and I ask you how you get to Kansas City, and you say you go south, right? and
Yeah.
I start going south, I'm not going anywhere close to Kansas City, right? But
That's
that's what we
exactly
do in
right.
organizations all the time. And so there's an excerpt in your book. I actually pulled it out because I just captured it so well. All right. So it says, you can't map the route to your destination if you don't know where you are. Your dream as a leader is to have a team of people on a mission with you. There's nothing better than winning with great people, but you wake up every morning worrying about the hard conversation you need to have, the challenging personality that keeps testing your patience, or the wonderfully sweet person who is grossly incompetent. You have a vague idea of what great culture looks like, but you're at a loss at how to get there. Jenni, especially for folks that are in that like stage 3, stage 4 of what we call the founder's evolution,
Yeah.
that reluctant manager, disillusioned leader. I can't think of a more accurate description.
Right.
And so again, how do we really get to the bottom of assessing? How do we get to the bottom of understanding where we are so we really can start to make progress toward the destination?
Yeah, and I love that you mapped that out like that because it is true. It's like, if you don't know where you are, how can you get to where you wanna go? And
Mm.
most leaders will have this kind of idea of what great culture looks like, but the thing that I found was none of us know how. Like, we will hear the ideas of great cultures and we'll but we kind of put it to the back burner because we're like, "Well, I don't know exactly what to do with that outside of do a staff fun day or add a few perks and hope that makes everything better." But the reality is my definition of culture is clarity of who we are and how we work together to achieve our mission. And so that's our starting place is we've got to bring clarity to who we are, what's unique, what's distinct about us as an organization. Now that includes your mission, that includes your vision of that idea of where you want to go. And it's the distinctiveness about your business. What makes you different from the similar business across town or similar organization across town? What are those distinctives? And the challenge for us, especially at those stages of the founder's evolution, is it's mostly intuitive, right? Like up to this point of our leadership journey as a founder, we kind of instinctively know what's true. We know who we are and we know how we want to work together
Yeah.
to achieve that mission. And so we're going off of instinct. Every decision we're making, every how we're interacting with our team, it's usually quite relational and it's very intuitive. The problem is that you're expecting everybody on your team to interpret that. You're expecting everybody to kind of just catch it and kind of understand
Right.
who we are and how we work together. So when we talk about how do we assess, first of all, we've got to be really clear, bring that clarity to who we are and how we work together. So making sure that you're saying, hey, you're starting to give that North Star. And then from there you're assessing, okay, are we actually living into that? Like, are we
Yeah.
actually, the more clarity I bring to who we are and how we work together, the more uh that's my starting point then for going, okay, how close are we to that? Right? Like that's our litmus test for how do are we actually living into the culture we want?
Yeah. So good. So I'm very interested to hear what you have to say to this. Because one of the things that I've seen is folks will use employee churn as a proxy for health, right?
Sure.
And so you'll have folks that have very little churn, you single digit percentages. And they'll think because no one leaves, right? We've got a great culture. Is that true?
Great question. I wish it were true. It might be telling of, uh, you have a culture that the people who have been there a long time are completely comfortable with. So then my question would be, are you actually living into that mission, right? Like,
Yeah.
how on mission are you? If you've got people who are not leaving and they're staying, is it because they are really rallied around? Like, are you seeing the results you want? That would be my question to you. Is a little, we don't want an excessive amount of churn, but no movement at all, no turnover also is another raises another, like, red flag for me of like,
Yep.
well, why is that? Is it
Yeah.
that we've made it so comfortable that people, don't wanna leave because they don't wanna be disrupted? And so I think there's a balance in there somewhere of too much turn and there's something going on that's making people, leave. Not some churn, and you're starting to go, well, why is it that everybody's staying and not wanting to leave? Like, what is it about that? So it's telling you something about your culture. That's where I would say, Scott, is I would put, if I were, let's say I were going into that organization and helping them assess their culture, that lack of turnover would make me curious. I'd say, okay, time to put my curiosity hat on and go, what's that about? Like,
Yeah.
why do people never leave? Is it that the perks are just so good? Is it that it's just super comfortable? Is it that they actually have really remarkable leaders and they're feeling really challenged and really motivated? But oftentimes, um, when I see that level of people just hunkering down, it tells me we're playing it safe and we're probably not on mission.
Yeah.
But I'd be curious, you probably have some insights on that as well.
No, I think it's so true. I think, there's a whole conversation there about treadmill and how all those things fit together.
Yeah.
But I really couldn't agree more. And I love the insight of that question, like, how are your results? As I was thinking about it, thinking about the handful of clients that I've had that have kind of been in that trap, every single one of them brought me in because they weren't getting the results that they wanted,
Mhm.
right? And every
Right.
single one of them had some kind of culture dysfunction that was going on. So I want to make this a little bit more kind of granular, practical for folks because in your book you laid out. And I remember the first time I saw you teach this, it just blew my mind. But the hierarchy of culture needs, right?
Yeah.
And so I want to overlay this idea of churn and this culture of needs because I think it's a really helpful diagnostic tool. And I want to see what you have to think about it. So level one, if I'm not mistaken, basic needs,
Mhm.
and maybe you can explain that for us a little bit here in a second. But what I was thinking is, if your best people, not the ones that you want to leave, but like the ones you wish didn't leave, right, or at least kind of middle up, if they're leaving or disengaging because of compensation, you can do whatever you want north of that, and it's not going to matter. Is that true?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. So the culture hierarchy of needs that's in the book was really built on this idea that there are things we need to provide as leaders in order for team members to fully flourish or thrive
Yeah.
inside the organization. And as leaders, we want them all thriving. Like we want
Mm.
everybody thriving, fully engaged, living out their personal passions alongside the mission, etc. And what I found over and over is that there were often just core needs that team members had. And the thing that was really fascinating to me as I was kind of parsing all this out was the relationship between when leaders provide a level of clarity and basic needs, and I'll unpack that a little bit more in a minute, the level of trust it creates that leads to some of the upper levels of the hierarchy. And
Yes.
much like Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, right? It's like you have the basics of food, water, shelter, and before you can have connection and belonging. And the
Mm.
same thing is true in organizations. And most of the time we aspire towards the top of the pyramid. We want the connection, we want the fulfillment, we want the psychological safety, which is kind of a fancy phrase for trust. We want all of those things inside of our teams. But the first two levels of that hierarchy are the responsibility of the leader. And like you mentioned, basic needs meaning have we clearly given them an understanding of our mission, our vision, our purpose as an organization? Are we hyper clear about who we are? Are we compensating them appropriately? I was working with a nonprofit recently that, the inflation has, taken its toll on every organization. Everybody's had to make adjustments in salaries and things, but what they were finding is that some of their more entry level team members were struggling so much because those were the salary ranges that were feeling the pinch of the economic dynamics, and they were just having a churn at, like, this more entry level parts of the
Yeah.
organization, and some of these were really, really good hires, but they were getting
Mm.
poached by other companies because they were stuck on basic needs. Like, they couldn't more
Right.
fully engage in the organization because it was like, "Can I pay my bills? Can I
Yeah.
provide for my family?" Like, they were just stuck at basic needs. And so those are the things that employers need to be really conscious of is, am I hindering some of my best talent because they just need 5 grand more a year? Like, a lot
Yeah.
of times this is not like, budget breaking decisions for us. Or they have a computer that we haven't replaced because we're trying to tighten up our IT budgets.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden their computer's taken 10 minutes to boot up every morning, and we're slowing them down and frustrating them. Well, those are basic needs that we can actually help solve. The broken office chair or, fill in the blank, but there's so many things that sometimes we will have systems that, create a deficit of basic needs.
Yeah.
And we don't know that it's creating such a level of frustration that it's keeping employees, kind of stuck in
Yeah.
just those very fundamental things that help them do their job.
Yeah.
And that was a big aha for me. I had a organization that I was working with, and literally it was the computer issue. And, the computer for this employee wasn't supposed to be replaced for another 6 months, but it was not working. Like, she was doing gymnastics to try to just get it to work every day, and you're like, "Okay, at some point, like, it is not worth a $1,500 computer to watch this employee walk out the door out of frustration."
Right.
And so that's the kind of stuff that I think, and the more senior we are, the bigger our organization is, the more those things can be off our radar, and those things become culture busters.
Yeah.
And so that's a big, big thing for us to be conscious of, is what are our systems, um, how are our systems reinforcing or eroding the
Yeah.
culture we're aspiring to?
Yeah. It's so good. And again, being able to just layer that on and say, "Hey, why do our people leave?" And then
Yeah.
looking at where you are in that hierarchy, so powerful. You mentioned several times, and you bring it up in the book, the kind of necessity around trust, and the relationship between clarity and trust. But my question for you is, what's the role of transparency in all this? Because a lot of people, especially when it comes to culture, it's transparency, transparency.
Mhm.
What is the relationship between clarity, trust, and transparency?
That's a great one. That's a great one, Scott. Um, so I think there are certain things, there's just a discernment required from us as leaders about what to be transparent about, right? I'll use an example that might spark another question from you. But one of the organizations that I was working with this past year, when I did the initial assessment with their organization, we had this really confusing feedback in the data, in that um, the data said that employees didn't trust senior leadership. But then in the comments, the employees spoke really highly of senior leadership, from, like, their level of, uh, relationship and connection with senior leaders, and I was really confused by this. I was like, "What? Like, what is, like, this, like, these things feel at odds." Well, what I found as I dug in, because then I, dug in deeper to kinda make sense of, "Okay, what am I seeing here, and what do I need to do with this?" What I found is that in my mind, in organizations, there are really 2 sides of the trust piece. There's the competency piece, and there's the character piece. And what was happening in that organization is that the individuals had high trusted the character of their leaders, which sometimes is not always the case. And if I had to pick the 2, I'd probably want that one. High trust of their leaders' character, so they appreciated them as humans. They felt valued
Mhm.
by them, and they had the relational connection. They didn't trust their competency. They didn't trust their decision making. And then as I dug deeper, this will get to the transparency piece, is that they had had significant turnover in this organization over the past, like, 18 months, and the leaders had not given much reason for all the turnover. And so the staff that were still there were feeling very fearful because they didn't know what was leading to some of the
Right.
departures, and they trust was eroding with their leaders because they didn't understand the decisions that were being made, particularly related to transitions within the team. Well, here's what turned out, is that the leaders felt like they couldn't be completely transparent about all those departures for various reasons, employee confidentiality and all kinds of things. But the opportunity was for them to get clear and provide clarity around, well, what is our process for, like, if you leave staff, here's what you can count on. And in order to kind of rebuild that trust, we said we need to provide clarity around, you're not going to be able to be transparent about every detail of key decisions. That doesn't,
Right.
whether it's team members leaving or other key decisions, you can't be transparent around all of them because it's not always appropriate for everybody to know that information at the same time. But here's what you can count on. And this is where we pushed for, here's the process, and giving clarity of the process rebuilt the trust, so that then they could be transparent in the things they could be transparent on, but they were clear about, there are going to be places where we can't give you all the details because it's not appropriate. If you were the
Yeah.
employee in that scenario, you wouldn't want everybody to know all the details of your departure. And so what I would say to you is, the more clarity we provide around what we will or won't be transparent around, then that helps to actually lead to trust.
Yes.
Is that kind of resonate
No,
with?
I love that because I think what you're getting at there is a huge element in trust is our ability to predict actions, right?
Right.
I trust you if I can predict your actions, and there are various
That's right.
levels of that, some healthy and some not healthy. Um, but what you're really bringing to light there is the consistency that comes, right?
That's
Bringing
good.
clarity about what we will be consistent on. Uh, in and of itself, even if you don't agree with the actions, you can trust the process. You can trust
That's right.
what's going to happen, and then better predict its effect on you, right? And
Yes.
and
Yep.
fundamentally, like I forget who it says, but who says this was like we're all narcissists, myself included. And anytime there's organizational change, the one question everyone is asking is, what does it mean for me?
That's right.
And so if you can, especially ahead of time, lay out some of the ground rules for what you can be transparent on, what you can be clear on, and you do that consistently, it's
Yes.
so much easier to navigate those
Yeah.
waters.
Yeah,
I love that.
you hit it on the nail on the head. The consistency piece is like, we want to show up as consistently as we can as leaders, and that's why if we can proactively say, "Hey, here's what you can expect. Here's the process." That clarity of like, "Hey, here's how we handle these scenarios, and this is what you can expect. Here's where we'll be as transparent as we can. Here's where, we will be appropriately transparent for the situation." But the more that you can anticipate that, just like you said, and then consistently live into that, because then I had the argument from that team was, well, every situation is different. I was like, well, every person is different. But most of the situations we could boil down to departures. There were two or three different scenarios for most of the departures in the organization. And so I said, we can create a system for here's what to expect,
Yeah.
and as soon as we communicated that and gave that clarity, you're right. Everybody's saying, what does this mean for me? Well, now I know what to expect. And as I see the leader consistently play that out, in the next few examples, we start to build trust, and they
Yeah.
start to feel more comfortable and confident in the organization and the leaders.
Yeah, it's so true. Jenny, this conversation could go on for another 6 hours. But I want to, before I let you go, I want to tackle one more question here. You've actually answered it before. But one of the things I know about great leaders is that they have great ideas, and those ideas change over time as we improve. So I'd love to hear from you. With current context, everything that's going on, working all this work that you've done in the book and helping people to implement. What would you say is the biggest secret that you wish wasn't a secret at all? What's that one thing you wish everybody watching or listening today knew?
Here's the learning that I think I'm in right now is that the phrase I keep coming back to is that people are the point, right? That as a leader, we're so driven, we're so goal oriented, we want to accomplish so much, myself included. But the thing that I keep finding myself coming back to is that any great vision, any grand goal is really irrelevant without a great team of people helping me make that happen, right? That are unified, aligned in it. And there's so much more joy in doing good work with good people.
Mm.
And I think the growth edge for me over the years has been the more I've become aware of that and I've lived into that reality that people are the point, like that the
Yeah.
actual work I get to do as a leader is really to steward the talent of the people assembled to help me achieve this goal together. And it's always in support of a mission. Like, we're a team on a mission. We're not just a social club, right?
Yeah.
But the more that I can grasp the value of waking up every day going, people are the point, the people that are on my team, the people that we're serving, when that's my motivation and that's my goal, I think that unlocks something unique in me that makes the
Mm,
purpose of my work so much more meaningful.
yes. I love that. A big thing that I've built Scale Architects to do is to help restore the nobility of work. And I think
Mm.
such a huge element of that is yes, purpose, and yes, all the stuff around it, but doing good work with good people. I can't think of a better point to end on. It's brilliant. Absolutely love it. We have just scratched the surface of one of the five big concepts that you lay out in the book. Where can folks find the book and dive more into Culture Matters?
Yeah. Well, Scott, thanks so much for caring about this topic and for the work that you do to help us thrive as leaders. Just all the work you're doing with Scale Architects and with the Founders Evolution. is just so valuable because I'm in the founder's journey myself trying to figure out, okay, what do I need next? And you're such a resource for that. So first of all, thank you for that. The book is Culture Matters. You can find it anywhere books are sold. You can also go to culturemattersbook.com, find all kinds of additional resources and support there. So love for y'all to check it out.
Excellent. We'll get those links in the show notes so everyone can grab them. Highly, highly recommend it. The only problem is once you read one of Jenni's books, you'll want to read all of them. And there's some good ones out there. But Jenni, thanks for being on the show. Just a privilege and honor having you back with us. Loved this conversation. Loved the book. It was fantastic. For those of you watching and listening today, you know your time and attention mean the world to us. I hope you got as much of this out of this conversation as I know I did. And I cannot wait to see you next time. Take care.